Welcome to Personally, Personas podcast, where we bring you closer to the personal stories behind some of the most innovative and inspiring entrepreneurs of our time. I'm your host, Giansante, and today's episode, we're going to venture into the dynamic intersection of technology and travel. Our guest is Cynthia Huang. Cynthia is the co-founder and CEO of Dtravel. Dtravel is more than just a travel platform. It's a community-led operational system for travel. They're revolutionizing the way guests and hosts connect. But without further ado, let's talk to Cynthia. All right. Thank you, everyone. So as said, I'm here with Cynthia. So Cynthia, thank you so much for the time and for being here. I haven't introduced you, but I want to hear from you. How do you describe yourself? Can you just give a quick intro about who Cynthia is?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. So I would say I am probably a serial entrepreneur. That's how I would define myself right now, but I'm also kind of a nerd. So I've been a 3-time founder now in crypto and travel. And then for fun, I like to play Magic the Gathering, go to music festivals, go hiking, lots of outdoor activities. And then I love to cook and I'm a huge bookworm.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I'm big into music as well.
Nice.
And all. Having said that, I mean, you mentioned like you're a multi-entrepreneur, like you built different businesses. I was looking at like your experience as I was, doing some research on you. And I know you built Altcoin Fantasy, you built Air Host Forum, and now Dtravel. So it's literally like a lot of companies, but not only that, they're all in Web3 and travel. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to build companies around these spaces?
Definitely. So with Air Host Forum, that was something that I actually did to solve my own problem. In 2014, I decided to become an Airbnb host, and I didn't really know what hosting meant at the time. It was pretty new, especially in Vancouver, where I was originally from. And I decided to create this forum with my husband so that we could learn what hosting meant, meet other hosts all around the world, and really just build a community. And from that experience, I guess that was my first entrepreneurial experience. And I really fell in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur and solving problems and being, really creative and kind of hustling. And I would say that that kind of led me to accidentally be an entrepreneur, because the next startup that I did, Altcoin Fantasy, was again like something that was more of a passion project from the beginning. And then it ended up doing really well. So we built that up into over 350,000 users. And unfortunately, we had to shut that down because we had some issues with Google Play since it was a mobile app. But then because of the experiences, both with Altcoin Fantasy and then Air Host Forum, I think that really was the perfect experience in the past to bring me to Dtravel, which is combining two areas I'm really passionate about, the short-term rental industry and then Web3, because it kind of seemed such a natural fit to bring two elements together and use those to solve the problems that I was seeing in my experiences as a host.
You said something really interesting that I feel it's probably like a natural theme around founders, which is finding a problem that you're currently facing and ways to solve it, right? So like creatively solving it or finding new ways of solving this problem. So it feels like this is also a recurring theme, and it's great to hear that. Do you have like any, you're building like all these companies, but now as a CEO, I think Dtravel is getting to a point where it has like, the sky's the limit, literally. And I think, as you mentioned, it has more opportunities to grow because of the Web3 concept, all of being decentralized and all. But I would imagine you face a lot of challenges building that, not only because of the business model, but also as a CEO, as a founder. You have probably challenges that are new to you, maybe challenges that you would probably expect because you built previous companies as well. So can you walk me through a little bit of the current challenges, in the existing business, but also things that you're like, I kind of knew this was going to happen because I built businesses before and I was a bit more prepared this time. Maybe share a little bit of that.
Yeah, great questions. So I would say that as a Web3 founder specifically, what's quite interesting is that because this industry changes so quickly, given that it's new, and I'm not sure if with, the introduction of the internet and with Web2 and mobile, maybe this same thing happened. I imagine it probably did, but the industry moves so quickly. And so in 6 months, it does not look like today. And that means that you're constantly having to adapt and you're constantly having to change. And the unique challenges of being a Web3 founder is that you are constantly having to try new things and learn new things. And I like to say that you're very much a product of sort of the circumstances that you're in terms of the market. So how we do things as founders today in Web3 is going to be very different than what it looks like a year from now. And if you launch your startup now versus a year from now, again, the way that you launch is going to be very different. And I think that's quite different from traditional startups, which tends to be quite similar. Like if you're a SaaS startup today, generally, obviously there's going to be differences, but you're doing a lot of the same things as somebody who launched, a year ago or 5 years ago. And some of the unique challenges, but also opportunities, I think, in Web3 is that we're very community oriented, right? We're all about our communities. The idea is that we're all very community driven and we're community owned. And the opportunity with that is that we have this army of people who want to go out and help us grow, who want to promote us, who want to help us build our brand. They feel very much like owners, and that's really magical and special. But then the challenges also are that they, have a say, right? And we care very much about what our community members think. We take everything to heart. And sometimes it can be hard to know who to listen to or what things to listen to. And it's already hard, I think, as a founder to know the right decisions to make. And now you have all of these other people who are chiming in. And so I think really leaning into your intuition and leaning into your team who have a lot of expertise, I think is really important to make sure that you know what your vision is and you're always driving towards that vision, but then also having the space that you're listening to what other people are saying and making sure that you're taking that advice and feedback the way that you need to.
I know we're talking about Dtravel a lot, but I'm not sure if people know what Dtravel is. Do you mind maybe sharing a little bit about what it is, what do you do? And you mentioned community, and I mean, I'm a big fan of communities, so I'm a bit biased, but if you would also explain us, like, what does that mean for Dtravel? What is a community at Dtravel as well? It would be great to get this understanding so people are on the same page as we are.
Yeah, definitely. Dtravel is an ecosystem of products that's designed to solve some of the biggest challenges in the vacation rental industry. And these challenges are things that I've faced myself, as I mentioned, but also things that our team, who are very experienced in the short-term rental industry, have seen happen over the years. It's interesting because much like Web3, short-term rentals is a fairly new industry in terms of the form that's taken today. So even though what we think of as short-term rentals, which is a booking between sort of a host and a guest, that's existed for a long time. We've had like B&Bs and other types of short-term rentals, but really as an industry, it actually having maturity and having a name was, in the last 15 years or so with the introduction of platforms like Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, et cetera. But we've chosen to solve some of these challenges through specific products that are aimed to solve very specific problems. So we look at problems in terms of supply, which are hosts, guests, and then connectivity and reputation. So those are sort of the four pillars that we're really looking at designing solutions around. And the first one, in terms of being our host-centric product, is Dtravel Direct. And here we're really trying to empower direct connections between a host and a guest. And we feel like that's really important because I personally feel like with platforms, they've been really good because they've been able to give us tools to connect directly with somebody. So, as a host, you can book directly with me. But I think there's also been challenges because when you take away the human element and you have somebody in the middle, you have an intermediary, I think that leads to a lot of problems because now it doesn't feel like you're booking with me. It feels like you're booking with this platform. And I think that it actually makes you not act in the best way possible because you're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Airbnb or Booking.com is going to deal with this issue. It's not Cynthia on the other side. And so for us, our thesis is very much, we want to empower direct connections between a host and a guest. And Dtravel Direct is the infrastructure to be able to do that. And we call this the Shopify of direct bookings. So the idea is that a host can use Dtravel Direct to easily and quickly create a premium direct booking site and then use that to book directly with a guest instead of going through and booking with a platform. And the additional really strong value proposition here is that instead of a host relying completely on a platform, which is what happened during COVID, they have an alternative means for their business. Because if you're relying just on a platform and they have all of the control, they have all of the customers, if anything happens, now you have no way to run your business and you're in a really vulnerable position. And this is something that I've experienced personally in my journey as a host. So it's something that I want to solve because it's a learning that I had. And we have a couple of other solutions coming out that's going to solve the connectivity problem and then also address reputation from a decentralized perspective. But those are things that we're still working on.
That's so cool. I love that. I did mention like a couple of things that I'm very familiar with. As an Airbnb host myself, I kind of feel like the exactly what you're sharing here. There's one thing that I would like to hear more, which is as as someone who's booking this experience through Dtravel. You mentioned that obviously the platform is there to support in some of the ways, but it's mostly like directly to that host or that like let's call like that person who is having like the opportunity to like rent their space and houses, whatever. From let's say Airbnb, Booking.com, and all on the technology side, there's more like say like unified experiences. Like the
Mm-hmm.
UX is the same, UI is the same, reputation is similarly. So you kind of know what to expect. What is different from someone who's using the experience through Dtravel? What changes for someone who's looking for a place to stay and whatnot?
Yeah, great question. I think that's definitely one of the things that people like about Airbnb is that they have a consistent experience in terms of the booking. But I think in terms of the actual experience of hosting, that continues to be pretty unique. So even if you're using Booking or Airbnb, the experience of you going to stay with somebody in, the same city is not going to be the same. And so I think with anyone who's booking with a customer of ours, it's going to be very similar. I think the big difference in what we're doing is that I think fundamentally, because it is a direct booking, then the relationship that you have with the host is actually going to be better because you know who you're dealing with directly. And I think both sides feel a responsibility to be sort of like good actors or to be on their best behavior because they know who's on the other side. Versus, again, I think unfortunately a lot of people on these platforms, because they feel like, oh, it's this big bad company who have, billions of dollars in revenue, they don't really care if they're kind of scamming the company, right? Or if they're scamming the host because they feel like this company in the middle is the one that I'm taking advantage of. It's not the person on the other side, not realizing that these platforms are actually being very punitive. So if, let's say, for example, they have this new rule where if a guest checks in, I mean, you probably know this because you're a host yourself, but within the first, I think, 72 hours now as a guest, you can check in, stay there, and then ask for a refund because like one thing wasn't the same as what's in the listing. And that makes it really hard for you as a host to do business because, you've already provided the service and a lot of times people are taking advantage of that just because they want a free stay. So that's really what we're trying to avoid is to have that direct relationship between a host and a guest so that they both feel a responsibility to be on their best behavior. And that's why we also want to solve this reputation challenge because, if let's say you as a host build up this huge reputation on Airbnb, if you go to booking.com or if you go to VRBO, you can't take your reputation with you, right? And the same thing with a guest. And it's silly because if you spent so much time and effort showing that you're a good host or you're a good guest, you should be able to own that and take that with you wherever you go. And so that's what we really see this future of reputation being, that it's not just locked to one platform, but that you can bring it with you wherever you go and that you can even take it and say, let's say if you're going to some other app in the Web3 ecosystem, you can actually say, oh, well, look, I was like a Dtravel guest and I've had 30 stays and I have like the best reputation. And therefore, this actually means something in another ecosystem. And I think that's really the magic of Web3 interoperability is being able to take one thing and apply that to something completely different and be able to benefit from it.
Yeah, and that makes so much more sense because the reputation should be on the person, not on the platform. And
Exactly.
you should carry that with you as a human or as an individual. I love this approach. And I know like you're big into go to market, you're big into growth, scale, and all. Is there any particular strategy that you applied to Dtravel or anything that you're doing now that you would like to share or you could share on like how you're scaling, how you're thinking about the go to market strategy for Dtravel?
Definitely. So you had asked me earlier about community, and I had said that within Web3, community is one of the most powerful things that we have. And I think in this situation, in terms of go-to-market, that definitely holds true. We haven't done any external marketing, but because we have a really strong community who oftentimes they have either experienced the pains of being a host or a guest. And so they really understand the problems. They feel really driven by what we're trying to solve and this vision that we're building. And so they go out and help promote for us. And I think that's been something really, really powerful. And the way that we define community is people who are coming into our ecosystem, and we want to give them a voice. So we had our first ever community hosted event in London in October, which was really exciting. So we had community members actually come together and plan this event on their own. They hosted it. They brought their communities together to teach them about Dtravel. And I think that we want to do many more of these things, because what's interesting to see is that even though Web3 is the one who's really been talking a lot about community, this exists a lot in Web2. And I think big companies are really waking up to this. And I'm sure you probably see this as well. But so many Web2 companies actually have community spaces for their communities where they'll take input. They'll ask for feedback around, like, let's say if you're a retail clothing store, if they're actually going out to their community and saying, hey, we're thinking about these two designs. What do you guys think? Like, is there one that you like more than another? And I think that really shows that brands are so tied to their customers and their communities. And without having that strong connection, I think that more and more it's going to be really hard to differentiate yourself, because products are so commoditized across everything. And really, it's about the feeling that you're building with your community that builds loyalty. And the more that brands really lean into that, the more that I think they'll be successful. Because, yeah, I think products are just tend to be kind of the same across the board now. And so really it's differentiating like what you stand for and how your community cares about you and what you're trying to build.
Totally. I'm extremely biased because this is my role.
Yeah,
I work as
exactly.
a community manager, building communities. But I 100% agree. I feel it's kind of like a building and I hate to say that, but like a shield around your brand, where your community, your group of people who really care about you as an individual or as a company or as a founder, whatever it is, they'll help you grow. They'll help you be successful because it's in their interest as well. They want that participation, and I feel Web3 is very strong about that. So that makes total sense, and I love this approach. Having said that, part of a community and part of building something important in the community is the trust element, right? You want to make sure you can trust that group. You can trust the members. You can trust that they are who they say they are. And I feel that Web3 has gotten a bad reputation in the past for like maybe actors who are like abusing of the terminology, abusing of the system, try and create like ways to scheme and scam the systems and all. And I feel that identity is very important in that sense, right? So I would love to hear from your perspective on like building trust. How do you ensure that your community members are who they say they are? What kind of ways you have built to prevent this and to make sure that they can trust each other essentially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. With Dtravel, obviously, we're a little bit unique in that, like you said, with a lot of Web3, I think unfortunately there has been a lot of bad actors, and that's becoming less and less. But there is definitely this element of anonymity that kind of is a problem in Web3. And with us, because we have that real life element, we can't have obviously that lack of trust. With us, how we're solving this initially is that all of the direct booking websites that people are requesting to publish, we're actually reviewing that first to make sure that it is legitimate. So we look at whatever information they're providing, matching that up against any other platforms that they've connected to, looking at their contact information, et cetera, just to make sure that they are legitimate. And what's really exciting is that we actually have a partnership that's coming up very soon. So it's going to be sort of like a triad where another person is going to be verifying that, and that can be somebody from our community. So it's really exciting because one of the big problems that exist in short-term rentals today is there's no verification of listings. So if you're going to Airbnb or Booking.com or VRBO, the ID is verified, meaning that you obviously have to submit a government ID, but the listing itself is not verified. So either the listing could be fake or things within the listing don't match what are in the photos. And I think this is a really big problem. I keep hearing people talk about this all the time, where a guest shows up and it looks completely different from the photos. So we're pretty excited about that because I don't think that's really been done before. And we're solving it kind of in a unique Web3 way, because instead of us doing the verification, we're going to be having the community doing the verification. So I'm pretty excited about that. And of course, with the introduction of this Web3 reputation system, which hopefully will be interoperable with other Web3 reputation systems across the Web3 space, then we'll actually have a lot more data around whether if somebody has participated in another community, or if they have used another product will be able to use that as data points to start to build a profile, even if they've never booked a stay with a Dtravel customer or if they've never hosted a listing before.
That's really cool. I like that. And it reminds me of the reusable personas that we're building. Essentially, you can use, so if you verify your identity through persona and you go into a secondary website or you go to another company and need to verify again using persona, we'll identify, we'll essentially say, okay, you've been checked before by us. So we know you are who you say you are. So you're good. So essentially removing the friction for the end user. Because we know that this data is validated before, it has been validated before. So we're running some trials on that. I think we presented this at the Money 2020 earlier this year. It feels like this really connects to the idea that you're sharing here as well.
Yeah, I think, we often put the burden on the user to do this verification. So it's really on us as builders and as product people to say, how can I make this easier on the user so that they have a better experience? And then there's also more trust as well, right? Because I know who they are, and they're legitimate, then that's actually really good social proof that when they come into your ecosystem, they're a trusted actor.
Exactly. That makes and it feels like more of a bureaucracy at this point than necessarily a technology issue.
Yes, exactly.
So
yeah.
I feel like we're getting to that point where we're tackling this, and this is incredible because I can see this is like being used in many cases. I'll be excited to avoid having to be verified many thousands of times because of every website I'm going through if I am still me. So yeah, 100% agree. And having said that, I know like there are things that you're seeing with the travel, but obviously thinking about like the future of travel, how Web3 plays a big role, and I'd say blockchain in general. Is there anything that you're like maybe envisioning for where you would like the travel to be, or would you like Web3 plus travel to be like as an industry combined? Any kind of like big things that you're seeing out there that you want to share?
Definitely. So I talked about this a little bit in terms of solving the connectivity problem. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges in the short-term rental industry that unless you're in it, you probably don't really know about it as a consumer. But what ends up happening is that if you're using a tool within the short-term rental industry, something like a property management system or what's called a channel manager, which is you can connect your account and your listing to various platforms like Airbnb, Booking.com, et cetera. So you just have to like enter your information in once, and then they'll go and push that information to other platforms. But the problem is that all of these companies, they have to build connections to each other. And so if you were to look at this visually, you would have essentially this like really, really messy web with tons of connections to each other. And it just ends up looking like these like crazy, like webs of graphs. And it's really inefficient because they're literally the same connection. So if you were company A and I was company B and we had to connect to Airbnb, we're building the exact same connection. But we have to build it individually, we have to maintain it, and then we have to go and build these connections to other companies. And it ends up being a complete waste of time because it doesn't actually give you any competitive advantage as a company. Like these are things that consumers expect from us. So it's not that they're coming to us and say, oh, wow, amazing, you have this connection. It's like literally core to your business. And yet it doesn't add any value and you're spending a lot of time or resources on it. And so what we're trying to do is to say, we want to build essentially a protocol where you can think of it like a master API where any company in the industry can build to it. It's just one single API connection, and then you can read and write data. So now instead of you building 10 or 20 or 30 different connections, you just build one and you're getting access to the same information that you would from all those different connections. And then it just makes the industry way more efficient. And this is a problem that exists where if you're a new company wanting to come into the industry and build really amazing experiences and products, it's really hard for you to do that right now because there's a huge cost for you to be able to do that. And not only is there a huge cost, but oftentimes these connections are permissioned. So even if you want to build connections, you can't do that. And that really holds back the industry because as you can imagine, when you have free markets where people can do things, then that leads to better experiences and better economies because now everybody wants to build something better. But when you have gatekeepers who are saying, no, you can't build to me, and really that's the only way that I'm staying competitive, they're not really focused on building a better product. They're sort of just focused on keeping new entrants out of the market. And so that's what we're trying to solve with the protocol, is to make it really seamless for any company in the industry to build and to really focus on their core business, which is building better products, and start instead of focusing on building these connections that really don't add any value to their core business.
That makes sense. I'd love to see that. I mean, is that something that you're foreseeing like happening soon, or how's
Yes.
the timeline for that?
Yeah. So we're making the first sort of version of that, where we're actually going to be our own trial company, I guess, to test this out. But we're also looking to work with industry partners where they see this problem as well. So we actually have a pretty well-known PMS partner who's been helping us with the design and building of this to give us their feedback on how they'd like to see it. But very soon, we're actually going to be publishing the protocol white paper and then asking for people from the industry to give us their feedback and to come and help build with us. Because, the problem with a lot of technology that's out there is that they're tied to one company. Whereas for this, we want this to be an industry wide open thing so that we're collaborating together. Because when you have one company that owns something, they have an incentive to either like keep it themselves or to have it benefit them. But for this, because we're in Web3, we're trying to make this an open and collaborative product that anybody in the industry can use. And that makes it efficient for the entire industry. And it's not something that's just tied to us. So yes, very soon we're going to have that available. And then we're definitely looking for industry feedback and participation as well.
That's great. That's great. Great to hear that. I guess this is like where like the main things I wanted to hear from you, and I'm glad that this. Like I'm seeing like great things coming at Dtravel, and I really want to keep following you all.
Thank you.
And one, like I know that we mentioned this briefly, but do you have any experience like when you're using like Persona, like if you're using for Dtravel, anything that you feel like is useful, or anything that you'd like share like as advice for fellow founders who are like thinking about building trust, building like a real identity? Because I know you're like big into the topic of identity. So anything you'd like to share on that, like as final advice on that?
I would definitely recommend that if you are going to be requiring any identity verification, that you don't do it yourself, because it does require a lot of overhead. So using a partner like Persona is really good because they handle everything for you and you don't keep any of the data, which is a nightmare in itself. So thankfully, there's companies like you guys out there handling it. On the identity piece, there are some really cool technological innovations coming out with something called zero knowledge proofs. And the idea is that you can verify a piece of information without actually knowing what the information is. So let's say, for example, if your product requires that you have to be 18 plus, you can actually get this zero knowledge proof to say, yes or no, is this person 18 and older or not? And you don't know how old they are. You just know, yes, they are 18, or no, they're not 18. And that essentially provides a lot better trust between the person that you're verifying that information with, because they know that you don't have their information that you have unnecessarily. And then you are getting the information that you need. So I'm pretty excited about this area in particular, because data privacy is something that's becoming such a huge topic and such a big problem. And there's so many stringent regulations around GDPR. So I think that this hopefully will solve a lot of those issues where, both sides get what they need, but your data isn't floating out there because there's so many privacy breaches as well.
Totally. Yeah, it makes so much sense. And when you mentioned this to me in our first call, I was like, I need to research more about this. I got very interested in.
I have so many things to send you. There's some really, really cool projects, especially in Web3. Like she has this concept of a data backpack that you can carry your data with you, and then you take it out of your backpack and share it when you want and when you need. But again, it's really just very little information. It just is whatever the criteria that they're looking for, but you're not actually sharing the actual data that you need. But sort of bring this back to something we talked about earlier in terms of interoperability, because you have this data backpack with you. Wherever you go, you can take it and you have full ownership of it, and you can choose who you want to share it with, which is really powerful because, if you're on Facebook, it's hard for you to take your data with you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very interesting. Especially, I mean, if you think about if you're traveling, you don't want to carry a ton of documents and things, and you want to make sure that you're like safe, but yet known in case something happens. People are like, oh, this is that person, and they can assist whatever. But for everything, right? For like medical insurance, for your own identity,
Exactly.
for proof of age, for several things, you don't need to carry like a passport plus a medical card ID and whatever. It should be simpler, and I
Yeah,
think we have enough technology to make that simpler, um, yet safe, and not something that someone can just steal from you and just abuse and use elsewhere. So
exactly.
I would love to hear more from your friend on that. Yeah. That's great. Look, Cynthia, would like to thank you again for the time. I know, like, I don't know what crazy hours you've been working out, because I know you're everywhere in the world. You travel a lot. But thank you again for the time. If people want to find out more about Dtravel or you, or follow you more, is there any social media or any link that you would like to share?
Yes, our website is www.dtravel.com. And then we're on all socials as either Dtravel or Dtravel DAO. And then I'm on all socials as Cynbear, so CYNB3AR, but I'll link everything to you as well, just in case they have it. And thank you so much, Ed, for having me. It's been such a pleasure. You know, I love to talk about identity and trust whenever. So definitely really appreciate the opportunity.
So that's great. Thank you so much, Cynthia, and have a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And please don't forget to share this with your friends. You can tag us on LinkedIn if you listen to this. And let me know. I would love to hear your feedback. What else you'd like to see? What guests you'd like to see next? And if you're a startup and you're a founder of a startup, or maybe work for a startup, you can apply for the Personas Startup Program. It's free to use for a full year and you get exclusive benefits. So make sure to subscribe on withpersona.com/startups.